And let's welcome again Estebancio Castro-Diaz. Sorry for my pronunciation. And he is indigenous from the Kuna peoples. He provides assistance to the indigenous leaders from, I'm not so sure if I can pronounce it like this, COICA, the coordinator of indigenous organizations of the Amazon River Basin, and other from Latin America and their base organizations to advocate for REDD, and other priorities they might have at the COP's meeting of the UNFCCC. And he facilitates COICA's and other indigenous leaders' engagement on panels and side events, and assists in preparation of proposals or submissions to the UNFCCC, including on the platform for traditional knowledge. He also elaborates of a training guide on the rights of indigenous peoples, REDD+, and safeguards, taking into account the local reality and with an indigenous approach and perspective of the Mesoamerica and South America regions as a tool of the training process. And I would say I would really like to listen to his sharing, because as I mentioned earlier, that it's very much needed that we need to have someone to provide all this assistance for us to navigate ourselves in all this complicated process, and also all these details that might take us a big lead, but if we don't pay attention or if we don't get the insights to those details, it might take us years to go through all this process. So again, Ghazali, it's your time, and also Estebancio.
Yeah, Estebancio, if ever there's one person, at least in my view, that is right in the middle of the triangle, climate change, biodiversity, and human rights, it is Estebancio. Like, he's very much involved in all three, not only involved, but also very experienced in all three streams, elements of indigenous rights advocacy. Estebancio, how are you doing? How hard is, I know that COVID-19 is hitting Kunayala very hard. How are you doing right now? Yeah, I think you have to like make sure that your microphone is working. So if you go to them, yep, and now put it on mute. All right. If you see the mute button, there's an arrow that points up. Click on it, and then it says select a microphone. So, and you can pick the microphone that you're using. That works, by the way. Yeah, while Estebancio was trying to figure that out, I just got word from Handaine. Of course, it is a holy day for a Muslim community, so that's why there was a lot of interference with his connection. So he excused himself, and we'll be able to bring him back the next session. So hopefully Estebancio is able to make it work. Hold on. It's not working, eh? Yeah, there's not a lot of things I can do from here though. You want to switch over to your phone? Okay. So you log off and go back to your phone. Sure, that's fine. Apologize everyone. We are Ah, well, we're just rock and roll. We're just trying to make best with what we can. Jocelyn. So
Yeah.
I think we have to talk for a little bit before Estebancio can come back.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. We talked about constitutional reform, sovereignty, self-determination. What stood out from you so far? Anything?
I was still thinking about this question that how can we bring, actually for me, self-determination and sovereignty, the very base is in us, our individual, our own behavior, our own decision making, and also how can we make control of ourselves. For example, in the podcast we had last year, we talked about wearing indigenous attire.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's also something that we can start practicing to really exercise what is self-determination, right? Because as I mentioned earlier, and as our discussion saying that sometimes we thought we had to look in a certain way to prove that we are indigenous enough to be able to speak for our people. But why? Why do we have to prove that? I mean, proof of we are indigenous enough to, I don't know, to the government or to someone else. I think the only people that we should really, in a way, to get the recognition or to get the to get the recognition from would be our own people. If our own people approve us, we don't need to put on our traditional attire to announce that we are indigenous. And I guess that's also something, self-determination mean, that we should be able to make this kind of decision without being required by others. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I made a tweet about that. Like being indigenous is like being Superman. Not that we have superpowers, not that I know of, for one. I think, but Superman is still Superman whether he wears his glasses or not. And these peoples are still indigenous peoples whether we wear our traditional attire or not. And it is up to us, like you said, to decide whether we wear our traditional attire. It is. We don't have to prove anything. Like, I'm not asking a representative of the Swiss government or the German government or the Panamanian government to wear his or her traditional clothes so that I can identify him as being from that country. So I think that's also it's a very good part of self-determination. A lot of people think about self-determination about country and state, but it goes beyond that. It goes more into the individual choices that we make as indigenous individuals.
Yeah, exactly. And if we can practice, to every indigenous individuals, then I think naturally we have better sense of how can apply self-determination to, I don't know, community or even state level, because we practice it ourselves every day in our daily life anyway. So
yeah. Right. Hopefully everyone can stay like 10 to 15 minutes longer with us. Estebancio is with us right now. At least I can hear him, so that's good.
Yeah, this works.
Oh, perfect. Nice haircut, by the way. Love it.
Just remind me that I'm in the jail.
Oh boy, like no, you're not. Well, it feels like jail, but it certainly, hopefully, it is not. Full disclosure, Estebancio is a very good friend of mine. Like I already said it in introduction about where he is in terms of like indigenous movement. Very active and very influential as well. So what I wanted to ask you is how, like we all heard that COVID-19 is hitting Kuniala very hard. Lost a cacique, a chief, a couple of days ago. How are you experiencing quarantine now before we go into like indigenous movement? indigenous rights, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, I'm gonna be very quickly. I knew that to be the last speaker was gonna be complicated because you can have a lot of time or you're gonna have a less time. So that's fine. Thank you for the introduction, Jocelyn and Ghazali and all the rest of the panelists who have been before me expressing your ideas. I think that that's great ideas. I'm probably gonna be repeating some of them. Regarding to your question, we as Akuna peoples live a very complicated situation. One, because our region is considered difficult access, which has been perfect for us because the colonization is stopping the colonization, is stopping the foreign, how you say, attack or come to our lands and territories. But now make us difficult because the lack of medicine, the basic medicine, some of you already highlighted, and also the basic food that is needed for the communities. And then the quarantine make difficult because then we have to think about the benefit of the whole community or just one person. So that's very difficult what we have. Now the COVID-19, I think that didn't bring any extra human rights violations or and other things. I think that the only thing that COVID-19 brought to this discussion is that make visible our real situation of indigenous people that we have in our communities, because we have still discrimination, we have still, as Hortencia say, support from the national government. We have we don't have the strong legal and politics framework on the rights of indigenous people and many communities of the Latin American. So that's made difficult for indigenous peoples really face directly and try to control the COVID-19. So that's more or less quickly, because I know that there are coming another questions. So, and I have 10 minutes. So, yeah.
No. You don't have to rush through anything. Of course, zooming in on the movement, the work that you do, that we're both involved in. Let me start with an easy one. Talk to me about what attracts you in the movement. What are you a fan of?
Hey, that's a very funny question, because it can go wrong like Jocelyn did. I think that one thing that really attract me when I first time went to the UN, I think that the elders from North America, from Pacific especially, and they advised me saying something like, hey, boy, you know that takes time to achieve something here at the UN. That's one thing that I stay, and one thing that as Rune say, we may have different opinions because we have a different environment, we have a different regions, but it's still what attract me is at the end of the day or at the end of the week, we have a collective opinion all together and try to push and achieve at least one sentence, two sentences, one policy that's gonna be very helpful for indigenous people. So that's what attracts me, the collective work that we still maintain as indigenous peoples. Yeah, we may contradict ourselves, we may disagree the opinion from the other regions, but at the end of the day, we try to manage to have at least one or two, three ideas that could work for the benefit of all indigenous peoples. So that's what attracts me. And also the indigenous people, I'm fan of the indigenous people's diplomacy. I think that that's very important. I think that many, as you in your introduction of my person stated, I have been in 3 different UN agencies, which has changed by the time because we are there. So the indigenous diplomacy need to be where the indigenous people's discussion is active. Because if we are not there, anyway, the state representatives, the UN agencies will take the control, will decide what they need to do, and then that's going to be more difficult for our people when the policies come directly from international level to the national level. So that's what we need to avoid. So that I can say that I'm #1 fan of the indigenous people diplomacy, and I appreciate very much the young indigenous people should come to this arena and try to do the best and continue the work that our elders, because we just going by in this arena, in this forest, but we're not permanent here. So we need obviously changes and different people and updatings and stuff.
Estebancio, you were one of the key players, for example, in the Paris agreement in terms of like indigenous people's rights being reflected. I want to talk a little bit about that, because what a lot of people think or they don't know is that we are fighting hard for like one words in a particular sentence, that, and a lot of people think that we come in and yeah, we put in like entire paragraphs, like pages of the document. What can you tell up to these people about like what you said? Like it's about small steps. It's about yeah, the keep coming back.
I think that, yeah, that's a very good question. I think that we need to develop those answer to question like this, because people can understand. Because sometimes, as Rune always also say, you know, we are our own enemies. You know, because I'm not here, and how can they be fighting for one paragraph? But they don't understand the background of the history of that. For example, I remember talking about the UNFCCC and related to this matter is that when I came in 2008 to the UN climate change conference, they only talk about the business. Is what they say. I came on the corridor and talked with the diplomats and tried to explain the importance of the indigenous people's rights. In order, we are talking now about the RED that time, in order to make more acceptable for indigenous peoples. I think that as some people remember, is what they say, is a slogan that we made about no rights, no RED, you know, because for us it's important to be reflected, because it's the only thing that we have in order to minimize the negative impact the policy may have in the future. So 2008, they didn't want to see even human rights. And everybody that they start supporting this work, and they would say, just go to Geneva or New York. This is what the human rights is there. But now, after, we can say 12 years after, no, I'm sorry, after 7 years, and when, because we're talking about the Paris Agreement, we see the change. We see the biggest step that we have made only because we started loving the states, friend of group of friends, sorry, that can make it work, and we can go continue with our work, because we really knew that if they talk in business, the only thing that really matter is that we have the implementation of the human rights, the implementation of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and other related instruments that exist. If we don't do that, we may not have a policy that could not help in the future. For example, now we talk about the Article 6 is still on, and probably people think, one article, they're fighting all day and spending until 4 o'clock in the morning, you know, but they think that the importance that they have, and this is a recommendation for the young people to contact people who have been in this process and understand that's not one day for one day the other day. That has been years of the things that we have learned in the process. And also we have been educating the government representative as well, because they change so many times. For example, every 4 years sometime, because the government changed, the state changed the new government. So that's what I think that the importance of the Paris Agreement, and especially when we talk about, I know that we're not talking about the indigenous knowledge system, but I think that it's important to mention, because it's one of the in one of the paragraphs mentioned that indigenous knowledge system, and we're not mentioning in this traditional knowledge, because traditional knowledge for some of us is nothing. You know, it's not dynamic, it's static. But we know that from our communities, our indigenous knowledge system is a system, is a knowledge that has been developed and keep developing. So we need to take this paragraph, maybe I only have like 6 sentences, but mean a lot of things, and mean and also help to indigenous peoples at the national level to look after the work that the government is doing in indigenous communities, or not doing in indigenous communities, but they have an obligation with the Paris Agreement. And also, for example, one of the things is national determined contributions, you know, how they are doing. And I have been reading lately many of the Latin American documents, and saying, and most of the indigenous community even don't know what they really selling to the UNFCCC. So that's I think that that's the importance that this Paris Agreement for us. And I think that we need to keep working on this. We need to understand this in order to make more easy our work at the national level.
Estebancio, also something that has been emerging over the last couple of years, not only climate change, human rights, enhanced participation, regions trying to deal, or not deal, but communicate with other regions, dealing with or approaching, for example, Indigenous peoples from Latin America. What is the biggest advice you would give to Indigenous peoples from other regions? Because it is not as black and white, or not as easy as people think it is. I would assume, like from experience.
Yes, I think that as I say, probably Rune will be laughing on this, and we have seen in the caucus, and also Tove, who has been many years in our caucuses, especially for the working group on indigenous populations, and later on different UN agencies meeting. For example, sometimes the difficulties that we have as a Latin American delegate is the language barrier. Has been one thing and that makes difficult to other people to understand the work that need to do, or how to approach indigenous people from Latin America. I think that we have organization established. For example, we have in the Indigenous International Forum on Biodiversity. We have platform for regional discussion of indigenous people in different matters. For example, there are groups for biodiversity, for young climate change, and other topics that has been emerging lately. So it's not that there is no existence of indigenous bases or indigenous peoples from Latin America having infrastructure. There exists. The thing is that I feel, and my recommendation is what you ask, is to ask to the people from the other regions to not approach because I'm handsome, because I'm a happy person, I'm quite funny. No, approach to the people who have been in the process, and approach to the people, to the elders, and ask the question, what can we do? I think that all the Latin American group, they are open. They are open to explain their position, what they think, because one thing that we have to understand, as Rune say, we have differences. We live in different background and grassroots systems. For example, the Nordic countries have different kind of development, and we live in the third world countries. So that's made differences that has been possible to understand each other. So yeah, my recommendation is that please do not take this granted because you meet a Latin America and you think that this is how it works. There are places that you can approach, as I say, the platform. For example, I cannot talk in many processes about the Andean indigenous peoples because they have their own group. Of course, we have one group to meet all together. And we have a COICA with the Amazon Basin, and we also have a Charcop group, and we have the Mesoamerican group. And can you imagine? We have a big 4 groups, which is also divided in small groups. So we really need to take this into account. Not to think Latin American is one thing. And probably the same thing in Africa. Africa have a Francophone, have English speakers, even Spanish speaker they have. You know, so this is how I think that people, state representatives need to understand that even that we have in one region as a Latin American and Caribbean, but we have differences. We have our own ideas which need to bring together, and then can you imagine how work is starting? I'm very sure in different regions as well. You need to get agreement in your own regions, and then come back and agree with another 7 regions, and then go with this with the diplomats and see if we can work, our work can go ahead for the benefit of indigenous peoples of the world.
Estebancio, I've like 2 small questions actually. In terms of your best moment working for Indigenous people's rights at the UN, and you by the way, and you cannot mention that meeting that you and I and Matthias had at the Mexican mission. You cannot mention that one. And like, what would you like to see develop for Indigenous peoples in the next 10 years?
Ooh, okay. Well, I think actually that was my answer when I, not really. That is part of the interview. I think that the best moment, whether I was there or not in presence, that was the UN adoption of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, because that brought me all the moments that we have as a regions, as a individuals, the work, the collective work that we did, and then we just achieve. I know that the document is not perfect, but we can work out with this, and that's the important thing, I guess, in my life, to see that document be adopted, and also in that moment, I felt all the people from North American, from Pacific that I have met, elders, that no longer they were in that moment to see, but they just leave the legacy, you know, that people that we have met, and I just feel happy for them, and hopefully that they were looking that day down here and say, oh, yes, we just got it. Maybe not perfect, but we just got it. So that's one thing. I think that this, because also for me, this document has been important, not only for the UN itself, but also for the UN agency. For example, as you say, UN framework on climate change has been, you know, because in 2010, we made to reflect the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People in Boston. I think it was in Boston. Yeah, well, one of the scopes that, and it was reflected because it's a document that opened the doors, and also the change of the traditional knowledge work to indigenous knowledge within the UN CVD meetings. So those are things that are, for me, has been important and continue being important. For example, I know that this question coming later on, the enhanced participation is so important for us for the same reason, because that's gonna change different discussion, different forums gonna be more open, and probably our rights be more reflected, implemented at the national level. So that was, now the 10 years, as I say, since the beginning, when I started, people already say, this is a torture. The UN system is a torture. Just step by step, step by step. So it's okay. But then I just think, okay, we established the UN Permanent Forum, the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. We somehow changed the working group on indigenous populations to the expert mechanism on the rights of indigenous peoples. Maybe the mandate are not the ones that we wanted to have, but step by step, we have been moving ahead. So what we don't have in MRIP and Permanent Forum or the special rapporteur in the mandate, and I see that in 10 years, we will have more specific mandate as Rune say, protecting our own people, our resources, our lands and territories. So I hope that in 10 years, we have new institutions. We may have a better understanding of the issues, that how to go further with our proposals.
Okay, right, thank you. Well, I have to say first, I couldn't really recognize you as Estebancio, because did you lose a lot of weight? Yeah, they're good. Okay, so actually, I want to ask a final question. I know we really over time for, I don't know, half an hour or something like that, but I really want to ask this final question, especially to you, because I think you know the situation that I've been confronting at the United Nations, that because Taiwan is not recognized as a country by United Nations. And so that that really challenged me a lot for the past 15 years for me to go to United Nations. But I found a possible opportunity for us, because for the people who are not recognized, it's not only the indigenous people in Taiwan, but also a lot of indigenous people around the world. They are not recognized by their countries. They are not recognized by by internationally. But there's this discussion about having indigenous entity as the observer or any kind other kind of actor that can be recognized and also to be official participant to the United Nations. So besides the state government, the indigenous entity might also be possible to participate in this process in a more, I would say, in a way with more dignity. And also I think that's something we really want, because indigenous entities, indigenous government is not NGO. We are not NGO, we are not non-governmental organizations. So I would like to ask you, what do you see that if this really possible, maybe in 10 years or in some time? And also what would that be really another kind of opportunity for indigenous peoples to really have enhanced participation in this whole process?
Oh, thank you, Jocelyn. Yes, I just, you respond to your first question. Yes, I have lost a lot of weight because the COVID-19. But anyway, I feel okay. That's fine. Maybe I'm missing a lot of Ghazali to you and other people, so I'm getting sick. Not really. Hey, okay. About your question about indigenous movement and stuff, I think that this is the last question you say, so I'm gonna try to put all together. I believe that the enhanced participation of indigenous people within the UN system is possible. It's possible within the 10 years. But I think that, and also regarding to your question back home, is that it's not that we are asking to the governments if we are indigenous peoples or not. It's why we have the UN Declaration talking about the self-identifications. Who are they to say that we are not indigenous peoples? You know, and our self-determination to pursue our economic, cultural, and economic development is important for us. And they may need to understand, as Hortencia highlighted as well in her comments. I think that the work that we do at the international level as an indigenous peoples movement have been important. I think that, for example, I would like to remind to all indigenous peoples that the work, what we are asking in this process is not from 3 years ago, 5 years ago. We're talking about from the 70s, or maybe beyond of that. You know, for example, when we talk about enhanced participation, how we want to see, now we have a one document, which we have our paper, also we have a Quito document. They are not new documents. They are documents who came, as Rune highlighted as well, from the regions, from the global consultation in Alta, out document for the World Conference on Indigenous Peoples. So we cannot say this is something new that we are doing. Shouldn't be allowed to do that, and indigenous people should not ask to that, because they have been listening all the processes that we have been on for a long time, even since the beginning, since the establishment of the Working Group on Indigenous People in 1982 or before that. For example, if we read the UN the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, we may not understand. But if you ask to the people who have been in this process to explain article by article, you may understand how it came to reflect on the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. So those things are very important that we need to take ourselves, understand that the enhanced participation is possible. The enhanced participation also gonna make easy, not easy, but a more flexible way to move indigenous people from the UN system itself to the other UN agencies. For example, we still don't have full and effective participation in UNESCO, for just to mention one, from the health organization, health world organizations, or World Health Organization, and others that make to understand that things has been changing and need to be updated as well as a state where we live as an individual also, or as a collective indigenous peoples. So I think that that's important, and I think that yeah, it is possible, and gonna be another big step, but we need to continue, because every time the world is changing, and we need to adapt to that, and also we need to protect our people, our lands and territories and resources.
Right, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that day to come, and that will really open up another, yeah, like I think the world will be really different if that could really happen.